This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. It's time for our weekly news recap. That's where we dig deeper into the biggest local headlines of the week.
President Joe Biden is making a trip to Chicago today. He is one of several high-profile politicians traveling to our area in the days leading up to the election.
Police say a man, Scott Lennox, called State Senator Darren Bailey's Springfield office and left a death threat voicemail.
Illinois residents have been receiving newspapers they have not paid for, or in many cases even heard of before.
The State Board of Elections has warned of a text message disinformation campaign aiming to sow confusion about Election Day polling places.
So many stories to dive into, so let's get started. Joining us today is Carrie Shepherd, lead producer of CityCast Chicago. That's a daily podcast and newsletter about all things Chicago. Hey, Carrie, welcome back.
Hey, Sasha, thank you.
Also with us, Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief Lynn Sweet. Great to have you back, Lynn.
Thanks for having me.
And joining us for the very first time on the weekly news recap is Alex Degman, statehouse reporter for WBEZ. Welcome.
Hello.
Remember that you can now watch the weekly news recap live on the WBEZ YouTube and Facebook pages. So we're going to start right away with state politics, folks. With just days left until Tuesday's midterm, the Illinois State Board of Elections issued a warning about a text message voter disinformation campaign. Sounds complicated, Alex. What is this about?
So I started hearing about this probably a few days ago. People were sending me text messages like, do you know anything about this? Look at what this is. So I looked at it, and the couple of texts that I saw were actual pictures of polling places, and they addressed the person by name, the people who were doing the texting. They addressed them by name. Mm-hmm. They knew their address, and they gave their polling place. But I immediately noticed that the Springfield polling place that they were looking at was wrong. Like, even I knew that, just not even by looking at a map. So I started looking around like, who's doing this? What's going on behind this? So it turns out that there was a company behind this, and they apparently realized pretty quickly that this was a mistake. It's called Movement Labs. They've been around for a little while. They used to be called Resistance Labs, and they contract with groups to do get out the vote efforts. They contracted with Voto Latino, Black Voters Matter, and Voting Futures. So the texts from Voting Futures were the ones that I saw. And they were going to encourage in-person early voting, and they sent an unknown number of voters. We don't know how many texts went out. Went to Illinois and a few other states. But they didn't mention that the polling places that they showed were early voting locations or drop-box spots.
So was this deliberate, or did it seem more like a mistake?
They say it wasn't deliberate. Movement Lab says it wasn't deliberate, but they realized that it sowed confusion, and they promised in a statement to make sure that everybody who got a text gets their correct polling place information, their Election Day polling place information.
I see. Well, Lynn, we're going to stick with the topic of disinformation here and misinformation. Quite a few voters have been receiving something called the Chicago City Wire, right, and other fake newspapers in their mailboxes. I know you've been reporting on this as well, so catch us up here. Some listeners have also heard our coverage here, but what's the deal?
So these papers are finally just getting their the attention I think they deserve. And the reason why is that they are flooding the mailboxes of voters across Illinois just days before the election, where they might have been ignored a month ago. So these papers are paid for by a company whose funding we do not know. But we know that when you connect the dots, they go back to three people. Dan Proft, who also runs the People Who Play by the Rules PAC, which is backed by Republican mega donor Dick Uihlein. So the content of the papers are purported to be local, but when you look at so there's a bunch of political content in there. It is slanted against Pritzker, but the papers also justify what they are as claiming to be local, such as that's why you have local titles, South Cook News, the Lake County Gazette, etc. But there's no local news in it. They have some pictures of athletes on the back without any, with no coverage even of high school sports. So it is political messaging packaged in a newspaper. It isn't so much of whether one story or one fact or one assertion is right or wrong, and that's what I want to make clear. That's not what's at issue. It's that this is partisan political messaging packaged as a paper, which means it escapes some of the disclosure rules that political action committees have to follow.
Well, you mentioned Dan Proft, right? In an interview with News Nation's On Balance anchor Leland Viturd, Proft, the Republican operative who's behind these, as you mentioned, He responded to accusations that he was distributing fake news. Let's listen.
How is this not the epitome or definition of fake news?
Because nothing in the newspapers is inaccurate. And we've challenged Governor Pritzker and everybody else on the left who's decried the newspapers to just point to one single story that is inaccurate, that's factually untrue, that contains material misinformation. They don't like the angle that we're taking on particular stories that we cover and the editorial choices we're making on stories. But that's very different than saying that anything is inaccurate.
Lynn, your thoughts?
Well, that's why I don't use the term fake news, because what's at issue is political messaging. So I think it's raising that argument, which the paper does too. We challenge you to find anything. That's not the question. Okay. The question is whether or not these papers are masquerading. These are political messages masquerading as a paper. So you see that's Dan and his allies are answering a question and putting out a challenge to something that really isn't the issue here. Now, I know some of their stories have not survived fact checks, but that, in a sense, is another issue and probably not as important a question to inform our readers and our listeners here. If you want to know what it is that you're getting in your mailbox, it is political messaging paid for by partisans.
Have you received any of these papers, Carrie?
I have not. I have picked them up when I've seen them just to check out the messaging, as Lynn notes. Mm-hmm. And the messaging is just like any sort of flyer you're getting right now from the Democratic Party or Republican Party telling you how to fill out your ballot.
Yeah.
I would say I think some voters are going to be surprised Dan Proft's name is not on the ballot.
Do you think the average voter understands what they're looking at?
No, I do not. I don't. No, I don't think they do. And I would say, Lynn makes a good point. It's more about, it's less the content. It's more like this is political messaging. This is not reporting.
Yeah.
But and maybe he's saying if you fact check this is anything wrong. We do know that Dan Proft's PAC puts out at least misleading information about the election. And this is, we've been hearing his name so much. I'll be ready not to say his name anymore, frankly, after the midterm, just because he's just been so involved this time around, as Ken Griffin was in the primary.
I think that's precisely how he wanted it, though.
Exactly. Of course.
Lynn, Bronzeville voters, they've been receiving flyers that 3rd Ward Alderman Pat Dowell is calling a, quote, subliminal form of voter suppression. What is this about?
So this, again, goes back to Dan Proft and the people who play by the rules PAC, because this is pure political messaging and it's labeled as such, so we know who puts it out. We also have signs in the west side of Chicago, so the messaging here is just to punish Governor Pritzker. But it doesn't tell you the flip side then before Darren Bailey. Mm-hmm. And that's why the analysis is then what is this trying to do? Because this late in the game, you want to suggest then who do you vote for? The other thing is these are heavily Democratic neighborhoods. The Democratic ticket, in order to win, needs every constituency, every base to turn out in really heavy numbers on Tuesday. And certainly the black vote, in particular the black female vote, is a crucial part of the Democratic coalition. So the analysis is this using the multiple platforms that Proft has, because he has similar messaging going out in ads, that the analysis is this is trying to discourage people from voting for Governor Pritzker.
Alex, lawmakers across the country, they've been expressing concerns about safety. This is after the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband. Here in Illinois, a Chicago man was also charged with leaving threatening messages for Republican candidate for governor Darren Bailey. What are the details here?
So if we are to believe what happened during the plea hearing this week, this was also, we've been talking about political messaging. This is the result of that. The Chicago man who is accused of this, he says that he was at a bar with some friends when a political ad came on TV, and he had been seeing this particular ad and a lot of others, and he was angry. He was angry at it. He snapped and he started yelling at his friends, and he left the bar and allegedly called the office, the Springfield office of State Senator Darren Bailey. He just said just some really, really nasty things. And I'm not gonna repeat most of it, but just basically he threatened to do things like mutilate, kill, stuff like that. Just really nasty stuff.
That's alarming.
So he faces 3 felony charges. Scott Lennox does, the 21-year-old Chicago man.
21?
Yeah, he's 21 years old, and he faces 3 felonies. So Bailey's campaign, in a statement, he responded by saying that he hopes Lennox gets the help he needs and that we're all Americans despite all of our differences. And J.B. Pritzker's campaign also responded, tweeting that this kind of political violence is not acceptable, and hatred, quote, hatred in any form has no home here.
Did he leave his name on the threats, or how? I mean, how long? How do they know it's him? Basically,
The FBI tracked him down because he left the voicemail from his cell phone.
Got it.
So he called Darren Bailey's Springfield office from his cell phone. They were able to track it down that way.
How alarmed, Lynn, are politicians in D.C., just in the aftermath of what happened to Paul Pelosi?
Well, we're talking about members of Congress here, and I think the real concern about security started with the shooting of Gabby Gifford years ago.
Yeah.
When she was doing a Congress on Your Corner in a place near her Tucson, Arizona congressional district.
Mm-hmm.
So there has been stepped-up concerns through the years.
Yeah.
There is a stepped-up concern among members of Congress after January 6th. There have been some rule changes, I think, that now, allows some political elected officials to use some of their political funds for some added security. And there has been, I believe, some changes made in being able to use what they call your member allowance for security enhancement. So any incident heightens concerns of members of Congress because these offices are basically vulnerable. What I have found, though, is that local police are happy to provide some supplemental attention, but they're not 24-hour bodyguards. I mean, I cover member of Congress members in the Chicago area, and they just walk around without security.
Really? Yes.
Yeah. The leaders have security, but the people in the top leadership don't. But rank and file does not. This kind of incident could increase a conversation about that.
Alex, the president talked about the fragility of democracy in a speech Wednesday night. Earlier that day, though, a member of the nationalist Proud Boys from Aurora pleaded guilty to his role in the January 6th attack. What were the charges, and what sort of sentencing is he facing?
So 25-year-old James Robert Elliott, he is reportedly the only Illinois Proud Boys member that's been charged in connection with the Capitol riots so far. He faces, he's admitted that he's a Proud Boy. He faces the biggest punishment. He's pleaded guilty to assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers. Now, that is, if convicted, that could carry a 3 to 4 year sentence.
Yeah.
And that's longer than anyone's been sentenced so far. So what happened was the FBI says that when the day started, when everything at the Capitol got going, he was wearing all black and carrying an American flag that said, "We the people." It had a couple of other phrases on it, I think. And even after the police officers tried to use tear gas and other riot control things to disperse people, he kept calling out this battle cry. And it's like you might have heard something like this in the movie 300.
Yeah.
Like it's that kind of a battle cry. So the prosecutors allege that that's when he started swinging his flagpole toward officers, and that's when the rioters tried to break through the barrier. And what ultimately led to this potential charge is that he was bragging about it.
Yeah.
He bragged about it in text messages and saying things like he bonked 2 cops, LOL, things like that. And he admitted on Wednesday that he is a Proud Boy. So that's that. He's one of 32 Illinois residents charged so far.
Is he? I mean, more than just a member of the Proud Boys. Wasn't he the head of the Northern Illinois chapter or something? I thought I saw in the Sun-Times.
One of the ways that they were able to connect him to the Proud Boys was because of that connection to the leader of the Northern Illinois group, because they spotted him with him.
Mm. This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We're going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief Lynn Sweet, WBEZ Statehouse reporter Alex Degman, and Carrie Shepherd from CityCast Chicago. And a reminder, if you're watching online on the WBEZ Facebook or YouTube pages, you can leave us a comment or question in that chat box, and I just may read what you have to say about these stories on the air. So let's do a rapid-fire roundup of races throughout the state, shall we, folks? Looking at you, Alex, where are we in the race to replace longtime Secretary of State Jesse White?
I'm kind of surprised, but not that Jesse White is retiring, because I thought he was going to retire like 15 years. At least that's what he told me when I first started reporting on the state. So it is for real. He is retiring. Alexi Giannoulias.
It is for real.
It's for real this time. He's trying to make a political comeback. Alexi Giannoulias. He's the Democrat that was elected state treasurer back in 2007. He was 30. And he ran for U.S. Senate in 2010. He lost. His family's bank failed, and it kind of got all tied together, and he never really came back from that until now. And he's been consistently so far polling ahead of his Republican opponent. That's Dan Brady. He's a state representative. And Giannoulias, he talks about his experience laying out budgets, running a statewide office. Brady is building consensus during all the years he's been a state rep, and he is talking a lot about the need to modernize a lot of issues with the Secretary of State's office, mainly at the DMV. And there's also a third person running in this race, a libertarian by the name of Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart, spelled like the famous comedian, exactly the same way. He's a former professional wrestler from Deerfield. The Sun-Times says he wasn't going to run until the Libertarians, who they were originally going to put up there, a man named Jesse White, he was reportedly, he says he was bullied off the ballot by Giannoulias' lawyers. Giannoulias' lawyers deny that, but they said that they were going to mount some pretty expensive challenges to a man named Jesse White running for Secretary of State.
Okay. Well, Lynn, what is happening in Illinois' 6th Congressional District?
So this is the big district where the race is tightening between Representative Sean Casten and Orland Park Mayor Keith Pekow.
Yeah.
So as we speak on Friday, the leader of the House Republicans, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, is coming in to do an event for Mayor Pekow. But President Biden is coming to Chicago, where he will be making he will be doing an event Friday night with the suburban representatives, the Democratic incumbents, including an event for Casten. That is also Representative Lauren Underwood from the 14th Congressional District and Bill Foster from the 11th. The races are seen as tightening there. There is outside money, an enormous amount, going into the 6th Congressional District in these closing days. $1.8 million from the Congressional Leadership Fund, which is the House Republican Allied Fund. So this is a district that was redrawn by Democrats to be Democratic, but they probably didn't put enough Democrats in it. And if there is a red wave coming nationally, it is also, I'm putting it out there to watch for, I believe it also is going to hit Illinois. And while it might not be as apparent in the statewide races, these congressional races are more vulnerable to a red wave. That's why you also are going to see Biden here Friday night in more of a closed event. Saturday, he'll probably be with some of the congressionals, Underwood and Foster, and then Vice President Harris is here on Sunday.
Let's briefly hit a couple more, Alex. I know that we've got these high-profile races that we talk about, but we also have some that aren't getting as much attention, like DuPage County Board Chairman. That's up for grabs. Republican Dan Cronin has held that job since 2010, not running for re-election. Why does this race matter?
Well, this race matters because it matters for a couple of reasons. But in the Democrat who's running in this race, Illinois State Representative Deb Conroy, she would be the first woman to hold that spot. And the Republican in this race, Greg Hart, he has been on the DuPage County Board for about 5 years, and he wants to get in there and make some change as well. Now, this race is kind of wild to me because I started off covering county politics in like small areas. I live in Springfield now, so you're thinking like Sangamon County Board, and even like out in Macomb, the McDonough County Board.
Yeah,
like they don't even take mileage per diem. So the fact that Greg Hart has $1.5 million on hand right now for a county board race, I just haven't been up here all that long. That's kind of wild to me. And Deb Conroy has about $800,000 on hand right now. So, and they're out with ads. They're out on TV with a couple of ads, and they're both running a couple of positive and a couple of negative ads. And it's a race to watch. It's going to be pretty tight.
Also, 2 seats on the state Supreme Court up for grabs. How's that looking?
Well, it still remains to be seen, but this is the race that people are talking about because if Republicans win 2 of these seats, then that's going to shift the ideological makeup of the Supreme Court. People in Cook County, they can vote too. District 1 is whether Judge Mary Ann Thies faces a retention vote, and I'm so sorry if I mispronounced her name.
Right, but that's different than the two.
Right,
the two seats that are up are in suburban. There are 7 seats on the state Supreme Court. 3 come from Cook County, but in order to not have the Cook County vote dominate it, 1 is from basically the northern suburbs, 1 western.
Right,
so,
exactly.
And that's different than a retention. Because
right, so
if she's so go on.
Well, in District 1, she's going to be that's a retention vote. But in District 2, the northern suburbs and then the western suburbs, that's where you have Democrat Elizabeth Roqueford and Republican Mark Curran. He's a former Lake County sheriff. And District 3, DuPage, Will, Grundy counties in those areas, Mary Kay O'Brien, a former state legislator, and current Justice Michael Burke. They're running in that race.
So much to consider on Tuesday. Let's take a quick pause here, gang. That's Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief Lynn Sweet, Alex Degman, Statehouse reporter for WBEZ, and Carrie Shepherd from CityCast Chicago. They're sticking around, and we hope that you do too, because there's much more news to get to. But first, as we just heard, President Biden heading to Chicago today. Lisa's got more.
I do. So the president is participating later today in a Democratic Party reception here in Chicago. There are some signs some House members representing the suburbs may face more competitive races than expected in their re-election battles in Tuesday's midterms. The Environmental Protection Agency has announced grants for projects to monitor air quality in 37 states, including here in Illinois and in Indiana, with a focus on minority communities and other areas that are overburdened by pollution. This is part of a commitment by the Biden administration to focus on environmental justice in communities adversely affected by decades of industrial pollution. Officials in Egypt say more than 120 world leaders will be attending this year's UN climate talks in Sharm el-Sheikh, and requests by environmental activists to stage a rally during the event will be responded to positively. This 2-week meeting by the Red Sea will start on Sunday. Several thorny issues are going to be discussed, including further cutting greenhouse gas emissions and boosting financial aid for poor countries that are struggling with the impacts of climate change.
The respiratory illness, RSV, is overwhelming children's hospitals around the country.
We don't have the beds available to take care of the patients in the waiting room. So we see them in a waiting room. We see them wherever we can put them in a corner.
I'm Juana Summers. We'll visit a hospital in Seattle seeing an unprecedented surge of patients. This afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Listen this afternoon from 3 to 7 or listen anytime on the WBEZ app.
Join WBEZ for a new season of Making, our hit podcast that asks how a superstar is made.
We signed it that night. We didn't let it leave the office.
Find Making wherever you get your podcasts.
WBEZ is supported by your membership and by St. Ignatius College Prep, a Jesuit Catholic school forming students for lives of faith, love, service, and leadership. Open house November 13th and an entrance exam December 3rd, ignatius.org. Support is provided by Chicago Humanities Festival, presenting live events with Jessica Lang, art critic Jerry Saltz, filmmaker Jim Jarmusch, and whistleblower Chelsea Manning. Tickets are at chicagohumanities.org. It is a windy day, and in fact, we're going to have a wind advisory kicking in overnight and lasting through much of the day on Saturday. But right now, 67 degrees, some light rain, and gusts up to 24 miles per hour. It's 12:29 WBEZ.
Back now with more Reset. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. If you're just tuning in, it's our weekly news recap where we make sense of the top local and state stories from recent days. Before the break, we took a deep dive into next Tuesday's midterm election, but there is much more to get to.
12th Ward Alderman George Cardenas is stepping down from city council at the end of the month.
Jesus Chuy Garcia's flirtation with a second run for mayor appears to be getting more serious.
Chicago police say at least 14 people were shot, including 3 children in the East Garfield Park neighborhood on the west side.
Chicago's mayor calling for a statewide ban on what she calls weapons of war after a mass shooting on Halloween night.
Our panel today, Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief Lynn Sweet, Alex Degman, WBEZ Statehouse reporter, and Carrie Shepherd, lead producer of CityCast Chicago, a daily podcast and newsletter about all things Chicago. All right, over to the tragedy that occurred on Halloween. Police, they're still looking for 2 suspects who shot 14 people that includes 3 children. And this was during a vigil in East Garfield Park. What else do we know, Carrie?
Yeah, on Halloween. Yeah, they were already gathered. The community. I think that like 11 of them, I think of the 14, are in the same family. They were already gathered for a vigil, as you said, at California and Polk, I think. And yeah, shots, 14 shot, another woman, I think, injured when she was hit by a car. Superintendent Brown, of course, showed up and said, there's a reward for anyone who gives us information, but we don't know anything now. I would suggest everyone read what Tiffany Walden from The Tribe wrote about, the joy that we're taking from our kids and what's supposed to be, I don't know, in your neighborhood, but in my neighborhood, kids were trick-or-treating and on Monday night, and we were handing out candy.
My kids were trick-or-treating.
Yeah, and it wasn't a ton, but she made the point of, when she was growing up in Lawndale, she didn't, her parents didn't love for her to go out trick-or-treating, and this is just this perpetual problem of this joy we're taking from kids. It's a really important read. I'm not sure that, and the mayor calling for some sort of ban on assault weapons. It's quite symbolic. I mean, but the reality is like a lot of those magazines are already banned in Chicago. But, as we know, guns don't abide by state lines. So, it's quite easy. Stephanie Zimmerman just did this great investigation for the Sun-Times about this, like pop over to Hammond. You're closer to Hammond in parts of the city than you are to other neighborhoods in Chicago.
That is true.
And nobody, when she buys this for $40, the seller's not carding her to see that she lives in Chicago, and he's not required to. So I applaud the mayor for that, but I'm not sure how far that's going to go.
And we'll dig more into that. But as you mentioned the community there, Carrie, after the shooting, we talked here on Reset to Yolanda Fields. She's of this group Breakthrough, a community organization over in Garfield Park. And she said, families are hurting. The shooting really just highlights this need to reduce violence and other needs as well.
We know that violence is not an isolated phenomena in our communities, that it is connected to other things like economics. It is the holistic way that we view our community and the things that we need assistance with helping to create a new reality for.
By the way, do we know the conditions of the victims at all right now?
I do not. I don't have it in front of me. I do think that the 3-year-old, I believe I read, was in very bad condition, but I would have to pull it up. I don't know right now.
Well, you mentioned the mayor calling for a statewide ban on assault weapons, also switches that turn handguns into machine guns. We've been talking about that this week as the Sun-Times and WBEZ have done a number of investigations about it, Alex. Do you think that we'll see any movement on this anytime soon in Springfield?
Well, I think what you'll find with most state lawmakers is, at least when you talk to them about this, especially in the wake of tragedies like this, they realize that they can only do so much. And because of the way gun laws are kind of, patchwork in this state and this country, there's only so many things they can do. They can chip away at it. And those are things that are kind of in the pipeline, I guess, so to speak. But as far as taking a huge holistic approach, like a one thing is going to fix everything, I don't know that that's going to happen. So we're coming up on veto session here in a couple of weeks, and there are some measures, like, for example, there's one that is still percolating that would make it harder for minors who have documented mental health problems from buying guns until later in life, until they're 24 instead of 21. So, things like that chip away at certain things that people can do. And, some communities that are implementing their own bans. But, these are the kind of things that are being worked on right now, at least the ones that we know about.
Yeah. Note here from Edward Tone over on YouTube, who says, we need jobs, not guns.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Which is what your guest was alluding to, right? That this is not isolated. This is connected to economic development and poverty in specific neighborhoods and attention from the city and funds from the city.
Yeah, it was really good to hear from her on Tuesday on the program. So switching gears, we're heading into the final stages of the budget season, Carrie. It looks like the budget's going to be approved on Monday. Some aldermen, though, do not seem to be so happy. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the case, right? Let's not forget, it's not just the mayor up for re-election in February. It's also aldermen. So committee hearings, budget hearings are a good time for them to grandstand a little about so their constituents see what they're fighting for. I saw that, I think it was Greg Pratt in the Trib said that, Matt O'Shea, which represents Mount Greenwood, Southwest Side, which has a lot of cops, firefighters, city workers, he's upset with the budget not having enough for hiring new cops. Others will say, wait, the police are getting a bump in for the budget. So is that really the problem? And there's other big issues like, next week, CTA President Dorval Carter is expected to appear before the Transportation Committee, something he hasn't done, even though we've had all these problems of safety and efficiency with the CTA. So we're going to see what aldermen say about that. But I'm sure that the mayor has the votes. She usually does. They usually do.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We're going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Carrie Shepherd from CityCast Chicago, Alex Degman from WBEZ, and Lynn Sweet from the Chicago Sun-Times. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, keep those comments and questions coming. So let's turn to the mayor's race. We've mentioned that enough. It's a crowded field, 13 candidates. We may soon have a 14th. Lynn, bring us up to speed. What's going on with Congressman Chuy Garcia?
So he is deciding, he will not decide if he gets in the race until after Tuesday's election. A big factor is whether or not the Democrats can keep the House, because if they don't, that will give more inspiration to him to run for mayor. Now, he will have just been elected to a full 2-year term, so if he runs for mayor, he will have nothing to lose. He will still be a congressman, even if he is defeated for a second time he ran. So he paid for a poll. Poll, no surprise, because it was made public, shows that he would be in very good shape if he decided to run. So my analysis at this point is that he probably will, because he has nothing to lose, and there may not be another opening. Once an incumbent perhaps wins a second term, it will just become harder, and Lori Lightfoot is there. So a quick thing, there's 13 people, but these are not all equal candidates. They might be equal in their mind, but, Chuy Garcia is a name that people know.
Absolutely.
Half of these people running, I know that they may think they're very important aldermen, and no disrespect, or state representatives, they are not well known.
Yeah.
So when you
talk Garcia,
about
you think
money,
will be competitive here then?
Oh, of course he is.
Yeah.
Because of the people there, the ones who have citywide name recognition are Mayor Lightfoot, Chuy Garcia, and Paul Vallis. That's why this will be a hard one for the Chicago Teachers Union, who put their endorsement already and money, as well as the National AFT, put $1 million into someone most people have never heard of. County board member Brandon Johnson.
Yeah.
These are not people in the news. They're unknown quantities, and they have never, ever been tested in big deal press conferences.
Well, tell me
speeches.
this, Lynn. There are 8 black candidates.
Yes.
Political observers are talking about how the black vote could be divided.
Well, this is a city, though, that is it's balkanized in ethnic groups. So you will have divided. If Chuy Garcia gets in, then you could say, how are we going to slice and dice this? Is it the black female vote is divided with Lori and Alderman Sophia King? So I think in a case like this, I don't think it should ever be assumed that it was going to be monolithic anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have a few other ways to slice and dice it, but in general, the more candidates out there, the better it is for Lori Lightfoot.
Absolutely. Yeah. Garcia gave Rahm Emanuel a run for his money last time. Like Lynn notes, most people don't know their Cook County commissioner like Brandon Johnson. He's my commissioner. But yeah, and to the point of the balkanization, right? You go west of Western, you see fewer Lightfoot signs. You see a lot of Willie Wilson signs, right? That's how they track their voters. They know which neighborhoods to go to.
Let's take a question from YouTube. Clay Goodpasture says, why do we have second elections in February for mayor and alderman? Wouldn't the city save money if we voted for local elections at the same time as our state election? What do you think?
Well, I could explain why it happens, but I think it doesn't matter.
So sure, Lynn has the whole history.
Lynn's like, well,
so
they sat around a table and they decided.
We have in the state of Illinois, it was decided that municipal elections should be in odd years and that there should be a separation from these statewide contests. So we could debate if this is good civic policy or not, but given that we already have a lot on our plate right now with the even number elections, in terms of our civic life, it might be a plus to separate it out.
Yeah, I feel like it would be overwhelming.
In many municipalities, not all, in Chicago is one, these contests are run nonpartisan. So, in just a quick thing, in Chicago, we have a two-step system for electing a mayor. In February, if no one gets a majority, then there is a runoff. So that would be a harder, you could have that all on the ballot now, but you already have a bunch on there.
Yeah.
So if we added, your alderman or whatever, or in the mayor's race, it would be there. But
that
is at least why it is. We could have another show maybe on if this is the way it should be.
Should it be this way?
Yes.
And would it save money on the next reset? No, I'm kidding. So before we close out city politics here on the recap, the aldermanic exodus continues, Carrie. This week, 12th Ward Alderman George Cardenas said that he's going to step down. What's he best known for?
He's from McKinley Park, Southwest Side. He would probably tout all the, he's built schools over in McKinley Park and back of the yards. I haven't covered him closely. I mean, we should note that some of the exodus of, the aldermen who are retiring, he actually has another position on the horizon. He is.
So that's why he's resigning.
He's in an uncontested race for Cook County Board of Review next week. So this isn't a sudden resignation. We knew this was coming. But it will be the fourth alderman that Mayor Lightfoot will have selected by the end of the year. Obviously, Nicole Lee in Bridgeport, Chinatown, Timmy Knutson in Lincoln Park for Michelle Smith, and then Michael Scott's, forgive me, I'm forgetting his sister's first name, in his ward as he went over to the Board of Ed.
Any speculation on who she might appoint for Cardenas?
No idea. I have no idea.
That is Carrie Shepherd, lead producer of CityCast Chicago, a daily podcast and newsletter. We've got Alex Degman, statehouse reporter for WBEZ, and Lynn Sweet of the Chicago Sun-Times. They're going to stick around because, believe it or not, there is much more recap to come. But first, let's take it back over to Lisa.
Sasha, widespread layoffs at Twitter today. New owner Elon Musk is overhauling the social platform. Musk did not confirm or correct investor Ron Barron at a conference stage in New York today when he asked Musk how much money the billionaire Tesla CEO would save after he fired half of Twitter today. Twitter's roughly 7,500 employees have been expecting layoffs since Musk took helm of the company. Attorneys for two men charged in a Chicago cop's murder are trying to put former police superintendent Gary McCarthy on the witness stand today. Officer Clifton Lewis was shot in a convenience store on the west side in 2011. Defense attorneys want to ask McCarthy about evidence they say the Chicago police kept secret for a decade. Well, tomorrow's Powerball jackpot, it's really big, an estimated $1.6 billion, the largest lottery prize in history. The Powerball prize hasn't been won in more than 3 months. The odds of winning, though, are 1 in 292.2 million. If you do win and opt for the cash prize, you'd get about 782.4 million. It's 12:44.
On the next Science Friday, contraceptive failure rates may be more complicated than you think.
In medicine, there is never any 100%.
What happens when contraceptives fail and how they play a role in a post-Roe America? All on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
Science Friday, today at 1 on WBEZ Chicago.
When your car has taken its last ride, give it a second life as the conversations that keep you connected to our Chicagoland community. Find out how and how we can help at WBEZ.org/car.
WBEZ is supported by Chicago Shakespeare Theater, presenting Measure for Measure, set in 1950s Cuba, where political unrest simmers beneath a world of music, glamour, and sensuality. Now through November 27th. Tickets are at chicagoshakes.com. Also by See Chicago Dance. The city of Chicago has declared 2022 the Year of Chicago Dance, celebrating Chicago's diverse dance community. Learn more at yearofchicagodance.com. Let Chicago move you. Weather forecast, 80% chance for showers and some thunderstorms, just some scattered rain here and there. Cloudy and very windy on Saturday. A wind advisory will be in effect and a good chance for some more rain, and then clearing Saturday night. This is WBEZ.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and we are back with more of our weekly news recap. Before the break, we talked about the mass shooting on Halloween on the city's west side, but we do still have a lot more to get to with our great panel. Joining us is Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief Lynn Sweet, Alex Degman, WBEZ Statehouse reporter, and Carrie Shepherd, lead producer of CityCast Chicago. We are still live right now on YouTube for those who prefer to watch, and we're still taking your questions and comments in that chat box on the right. All right, some Abraham Lincoln artifacts. They were pulled out of the Presidential Museum in Springfield this week. Alex, what's going on?
So if you've been to the museum at any point in the last 15 years, you've probably seen some of this. We're talking about the blood-stained fan that Mary Todd was carrying the night that her husband was shot, the blood-soaked gloves that he was wearing, one of the cufflinks from his shirt, his walking sticks, a whole bunch of things, like roughly 1,500 items. They got trucked out of the museum on Monday. It's not clear if they're ever going to come back, and it's not clear what's going to happen to the artifacts right now. So what happened was there's a 15-year agreement to display all of this, but that expired on Monday. And the foundation that purchased all of this, called the Taper Collection in 2007, it's still trying to pay off all the debt that it accrued trying to get all of that. It was north of $23 million, I think. Mm-hmm. So at first we didn't know who was responsible for this, but WBEZ's Dave McKinney found out that it was actually Hyde Auctions, the Chicago auction house, that there's no word on whether some of that's going to be auctioned off. They just came and moved it. But the remaining debt that's left on that collection is still around $8 million or so.
Wow.
And there was an effort some years back to get some state assistance for that to help some back when it was around $9.5–10 million. That didn't go anywhere. So now the two entities, they've been going at it for a while, and now they're separate entities, and the bickering continues.
What a feud. Let's move over to Bucktown's music venue, the Hideout. It got some negative publicity this week.
Yeah.
Fill us in, Carrie.
Well, I mean, it got some negative publicity in the last couple of weeks, and it made its biggest move in response, I think, to it, in that the Hideout, which has been an institution for a long time, run by Katie and Tim Tutton, is closing until, they said, the beginning of 2023. So that's, 2 months, which is right. But still, will affect bartenders, people who work there, because, people had canceled, some bands and performers had canceled their shows after this Instagram post that went viral by Michael DeVille, who was a programmer there and booker, and he really laid out what he said was a very, alleged a very toxic work environment. Mm-hmm. So the Hideout says they are going to bring in some HR folks and really investigate how they're, running the place and staff. But yeah, it's bad publicity, and
for sure.
Closing is a bad outcome for a lot of people, but many would say it's the necessary outcome.
And on a more positive note, fans of the legendary comedy improv IO Theater, it's back. They're celebrating its reopening. Tell us about IO Theater, Carrie, and just maybe some of the big names who have performed there or trained there over the
probably
years.
All of them, right?
Yeah.
Amy Poehler probably was there.
Mike Myers. Tina Fey.
Yeah, you always hear about Second City, but IO is kind of maybe the scrappier little brother or sister. It was in Wrigleyville. People will remember for years. Everyone probably had to go see a friend or friend of a friend in improv at IO. And it was run by Sharna Halperin. She has since left. In 2020, there were, also allegations of sort of a racist environment there. They opened a huge theater space over in Goose Island, off Clybourne there. just like a huge upgrade from their other sort of smaller theater in Wrigleyville. But yeah, they're supposed to be doing shows, I think, now, like this weekend. They're relaunching with new leadership and what they say is going to be sort of a new slate of programming.
Yeah, that's wonderful. They're back. They're open. And about the Hideout, we've got some chatter on YouTube saying hopefully it does reopen in the new year, Carrie.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say that, including the people who say they're not going to go back. I think until things are fixed, I think a lot of people really would like the Hideout to be around. I'm one of them.
Got some work to do first, though.
Yeah, of course.
Another art story for you, Carrie. This one is involving an artist that was posting some controversial flyers around the city. I think Hyde Park, for the most part. What happened there, and what did the artist have to say about it?
Such an odd story. Jamie at Black Club, Jamie Nesbitt Golden, I think, broke this story because she saw what was a flyer. It said whites only, but it also
had a noose hanging off of it.
Yeah, and my friends I know who live around there, and my black friends are say like that is. The artist told Jamie it was sort of a marketing stunt to draw attention to a show that she has. She did it in Hyde Park. I guess she did it in Boys Town too. But a lot of people find that extremely traumatic. And, our mutual friend Ariane Nettles said, think about some of the older black folks who have to walk past that in Hyde Park. She's, I guess, from the western suburbs, and this was part of drawing attention to her show that's happening in Logan Square.
What a way to promote your event.
Interesting way to do it.
She certainly got people talking, that's for sure, because it was one of the first things I saw that day on Twitter. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We are going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with journalists Lynn Sweet, Alex Degman, and Carrie Shepherd.
But I would say, sorry, she didn't give Jamie her name. So I always feel like if you don't give your name...
The artist, you mean?
Yeah, the artist wouldn't give her name to Jamie. So, there may be some sort of part of her that felt like, that wasn't maybe the best way to promote the show.
Or maybe she goes by a symbol now and she doesn't have a name anymore.
Perhaps.
Who knows?
Perhaps.
We're going to turn to a story that we discussed earlier this week on Reset. A judge has reduced bail for a pregnant woman who is facing a murder charge. This was for killing her boyfriend. This essentially means, Carrie, that she won't be giving birth in jail because, she's almost
8 months pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You all talked about this on Reset this week, right?
Keisha Golden.
Who
tragic story.
Yeah, who I think is in jail because she allegedly her boyfriend whom she killed, and they had a very violent relationship that had been documented, several calls about domestic violence at their home. And she has been released to her sisters, so she doesn't have to give birth in prison. And the judge said, she's not a danger to society, and so she should be released.
Yeah.
And so there was some sort of exorbitant, bail of like $2 million set, and that was reduced. But yeah,
I think a lot of the outrage here too, Carrie, was she had called the police 50 times.
50 times, I read.
Just between June and now.
Yeah, 50 times.
So, unfortunate. Ending our recap on a positive note, I'm looking at you, Lynn, because a pretty popular author has made a major donation to Northwestern University, your alma mater.
Well, so this is the author who got all his money because he authored the book of Game of Thrones, of which the fantastically
the massive show, that everybody but me watches
on it.
And
me,
never got into it.
What? You never got into it either?
No.
Okay.
And he did the give back to Medill in giving. I should have it in front of me. Maybe you do.
$5 million.
$5 million.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it would be more than that. He's made a ton of money.
For a variety of programs.
Carrie's not impressed.
This is not to deal with writing programs. This isn't covering the news. Medill has. The beauty of Medill is that it produces people who are journalists, but other people who go on to achieve in other areas of writing. And I think he recognizes, though, that Northwestern is a place to who he owes a debt.
Yeah.
And when he had the means, he is doing the payback.
Yeah, still a good thing. Before we go, I'm wondering around the room here, what stories this week maybe really struck you that surprised you? Maybe you thought they were underreported, something that we didn't cover today. Anything come to mind? Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I was just pointing to somebody else while I thought of something.
I thought you were saying,
Sorry,
pick me.
That was my signal, sorry.
I don't know if it's underreported. I do feel like something, I do want to hear more about, obviously, is I want to hear more from Dorval, Carter, and CTA. It's not underreported, I understand, but I mean, it's just reached a breaking point and it's unacceptable. We're a city of our size, geographically our size, like public transportation is mandatory. And I would say, as someone who used it for a very long time every day and didn't drive a car, the CTA used to be very, very reliable. I don't know if you guys used to take it, but it did. You could really get anywhere in the city on the CTA, so it's unfortunate what's going on now.
Have you taken the CTA, Lynn?
I grew up taking the CTA.
Yeah.
I take public transportation in Washington.
Yeah.
I took the commuter train here. I'm pretty committed to public transportation. So, yes, I have taken public transportation. I could tell you what the subway is like in Washington, where I do live.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the point is, there are some people who have never taken public transportation.
Yeah.
It seems that around the table, we're not them. But when you understand how kind of cool it is to not have to use a car, when you have these alternatives, you understand what Carrie's talking
The
about.
money
about
saving.
As long as
need
they work.
to make it work.
Yeah.
I think all you
Safe
have
and
to do
workable.
to look at some of the issues that CTA has with reliability and service is go to a city where that isn't an issue.
Right.
I went to
Right.
I went to Seattle for the first time over the summer, and I didn't need a car, even though I was staying a pretty good distance away from everything that I wanted to do. The buses were clean. They were on time. There were 5 different modes of transportation, from BRTs to light rail to standard electric. It was wild. Dedicated bus lanes. Can you imagine?
Right.
It's like, whoa.
Right.
Yes,
So-
I can. I'm from Toronto.
I was going to say, you have a good, yeah.
Sorry.
And to be fair, I am taking CTA in about an hour to go do my next thing. So.
Well, you'll have to report back and tell us whether it arrived on time.
Yeah, I don't take it often enough to complain. So
Yeah, and I love the Metro commuter line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Another great recap. We've been talking to Carrie Shepherd, lead producer of CityCast Chicago, a daily podcast and newsletter, Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief Lynn Sweet, and Alex Degman, Statehouse reporter for WBEZ. Thank you all. Have
Thanks,
a great weekend.
Sasha.
Thanks.
Yeah, you too.
And thank you to all of you online for chatting with us in the comments section. If you did miss the visuals, remember that you can head over to our Facebook or YouTube and you can catch up over the weekend. That's it for Reset. The show is produced by Meha Ahmed, Linnea Dominic, Brenda Ruiz, Micah Yason, Claire Hyman, Michael Liptrot, Andrea Guthman, and Andrew Merriweather. Dan Tucker is our executive producer. Ethan Schwab and Haley Bloomquist were our engineers this week. Monday on the show, $10 million is up for grabs for the group with the best plan to improve their neighborhood on the South or West Side. We're going to talk with another finalist for the Chicago Prize. Plus, Dr. Termina will be back. That's our infectious disease specialist. She's going to have the latest on RSV and COVID-19. A lot going on there. If you've got a question in the meantime, leave us a voicemail. We'll check it over the weekend at 888-915-9945. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Thank you so much for listening and have a great weekend. We'll meet again soon.